Welcome back here at Goldberg. Today we'll be talking about conservative anthems and what they say or perhaps fail to express regarding our economy and political system. One of the ones a couple years in the past that I recall was FJB, and I thought it was lyrically childish, but a lot of folks enjoyed the tune. Now, was it not tangentially associated with a NASCAR organization? I was under the impression they were all soyed out because of Booby Wallace, but maybe I'm incorrect. Screw it. Next, you've got try that in a small town, see how far your lard ass gets down the road. This is a classic example of nostalgic reaching to the era of your grandpappy in the 20s or the 50s. And it no longer exists. Unfortunately, a lot of patriot conservatives live under the illusion that it does because they consume this type of content or they live in the right neighborhood. They don't quite comprehend that we are living in very different times. The song was ostensibly directed towards BLM types, but then they had to edit the video because of backlash, which makes sense. Well, they want to believe if one of these individuals comes from the city, to the homogenous little town, and they burglarize a store, or they punch and knock out your great uncle's Filipina trad wife, the local posse's gonna get together. We're gonna feed them to the gators down here, and no one will be the wiser. But this omerta doesn't exist. What would realistically happen? Nationwide media firestorm. DOJ hate crimes investigation. The good egg whites of the community telling Garland what he needs to know. Egg sperms on TV calling for, eliminating the Second Amendment. This is the world that we are in. The last guy who truly was able to get off on that basis would have been King George the hamburger flipper in Florida, and that was because the law was so clearly advantageous to him and there was no footage. It was he said, and one of the he saids was no longer around to say. That's the reason he managed to walk out scot-free. Strangely enough, he kind of looks like Jason Aldean. Well, imagine that. But you got to be careful. Like I said in the bioleninism video, the Trump cells who went into the Capitol thinking they were going to be heroes. It was all going to be fine because they were probably sexually frustrated or financially. Many of them were actually in bad shape. Just this sort of haphazard stuff. This hold the line, charge the British kind of thing. It's disastrous. And I mean, there's plenty of other cases I don't have time to go into, but some people are having to figure out the hard way that the world has changed dramatically. Or the dude who thought he could run game on the jury. It ain't going to happen. You got to wake up and smell the coffee. Even if you are a cuck drinking Black Rifle, you got to smell it. Otherwise, you're going to have some difficult times ahead. This is another one kind of catchy, but
if you try to cancel us, American flag, right, American flag, we show you your ass, American flag, yeah.
So they believe that the flag and all the patriotic prawn, it represents an America which is probably there for around about half of the country, if not less at this point. Another part of the country thinks that the flag represents social justice, democratic socialism, diversity, LGBT. So you can't just grab onto this idea. I mean, as part of the culture war, maybe it makes people feel good. It's a enjoyable song. But don't be under the illusion that this is the real America. Like they always want to pretend it's the silent majority. Remember Trump saying the silent majority is going to vote for Trump? It's the problem where you try to castigate all these people as being NPCs, low information, loopy doopy liberals, soy boys, and then you turn around and claim, oh, but there's no way that they could possibly not vote for my candidate. Like this silent majority still exists. Well, the silent majority was that whole concept came out in 1972. Look at what the country was in 1972. Study the populations, who was predominant, right? What values were there? Not just that, but as we'll talk about with the economy, different structure in place. And simply ignoring all of that is done, in my opinion, with great peril. And here we have the ditty, which has garnered a lot of attention lately. Now, the dude is talented, has a nice voice. He's singing about how they don't care about minors, just minors on an island somewhere, a la Epstein, working all these hours for low pay. And, It's a struggle. But as much as the song is compelling, when you see the mentality and the reactions of working class conservatives, even middle class conservatives, where they're almost there, they've almost reached the source of the problem, and then they just allow themselves to get waylaid, in many cases, I believe, in a self inflicted manner. So there was a comment I could no longer find. It was one of the top voted. The person saying, I had to quit my job to work remote, take care of my mom, and they laid me off. I know I'll never get ahead, so I'm just storing up my treasures in heaven. I am so sick to my core of hearing that slave morality parroted by people. They see that the elites are getting away with bloody murder. There's still the possibility of organizing and trying to change that. People are alert, and then they just turn around and say, when I die, maybe I'll be rewarded. Why? Isn't that just a tool of control? Because, by the way, these religious elites like Austin, Falwell, Robertson, they sure like to live nice. And they can claim, oh, I'm going to accept God, or I've accepted God, so I still get rewarded. And you're just going to sit there in penury because you don't want to see past it and realize that maybe something can be done, but you have to change your outlook. And you have to stop repeating these talking points, which we'll get into in just a second. For instance, one of the lines of his song is, if you're 5'3" and 300 pounds on welfare, there it is. Conservatives that get so close and then they turn back to the scapegoat of welfare. Here's the thing, Raylan or Shaniqua being on welfare is not the reason why the elites are destroying your industries and wiping you out and bringing in these managerial types to replace you. It's not because of people on welfare. I've tried to explain this so many times, and it's like almost an instinctual thing for conservatives. They just go back to welfare, even if you try to show them the actual data. Ever since 96, the actual participation in welfare has, for the most part, declined. Even during the Great Recession, it declined. People said Obama was the food stamp president, but it was not this situation that a lot of Republicans tried to pretend. During the pandemic, people were legitimately losing their jobs, being thrown into destitution, and there were states sitting on welfare money, not paying it out. So, this whole meme of the people on welfare are the issue is a distraction from the economic elites, and it's been for a long time. You could make some other reforms. You could make it harder to get SSDI. You could make it harder to get more checks for babies, like disincentivize people reproducing on welfare. But that's not going to change BlackRock controlling most of the economy. It's not going to change Biden doing things or the Bushes doing things. Those are totally separate systems. And if people continue fixating on welfare, you're being controlled, you're being had for a sucker. That's not going to make a major difference in the economy at large, in what's affecting you. It could be some positive things if they reformed it more so, but that is not the core. So stop repeating the same talking points indefinitely. Yes, there are single moms. Yes, they raise garbage offspring. That in of itself is not the cause for the predicament that many people are in. It was also interesting because Chris Murphy, the Democrat, posted this on Twitter, and he said something like, we have to pay attention because the left has the real solutions. There are folks in the replies going, you don't understand. It's about the government getting out of the way. Once more, let's stop and try to be realistic. Sure, the government does mandates. It gets in the way in terms of some regulations. It might, on the local level, interfere more so. It obviously prints money. So the government is still playing a role. However, if you really look at it from a higher level, since the 1980s, the trend in a lot of Western countries, in particular the United States, has been for the government stepping aside in the economy. Thatcher built her career on smashing unions, and she was able to basically force the Labor Party to abandon their clause in the manifesto about nationalizing industry. Tony Blair was in favor of privatizing parts of the NHS. In the United States, let's just go down the line. Jimmy Carter deregulates the credit industry. Reagan, massive tax cuts, deregulation, amnesty, went after the unions with the air traffic controllers. He is succeeded by H.W. Bush, who, yeah, he raised the gas tax, but he was the one who pretty much brought NAFTA forward. It went into effect the next administration. The Immigration Act, which built off of 1965, that moved us away from a nation state limited restrictive model to a plenty of cheap labor for corporations approach. The 1990 Act only made that worse with visas, diversity lottery, more chain migration. When you get into Billy Boy Clinton, yeah, he raised taxes on the rich a bit, but broadly speaking, Clinton continued Reaganism. He enacted NAFTA. He did welfare reform. He repealed Glass-Steagall. He allowed the internet to come to fruition without any severe regulations on it. Then you have W. Bush. By the way, in the 90s, Soviet Union has collapsed. A lot of these countries are embracing privatization policies, even though in many cases it was wiping their economies out, plunging their people into poverty. Look up Keith Wood's video on who plundered Russia. It's very informative. W. Bush comes in, massive tax cuts, deregulation. He wanted to make Ken Lay head of the Energy Department. Um, Even with the financial collapse, they say what was caused by the government. Bernanke himself said they could have put in place restrictions at the Fed, but the doctrine had been from Greenspan on, you don't interfere with the economy. Milton Friedman had said, don't produce more money because it'll cause inflation, but because it didn't really flourish when that policy was adopted some decades in the past, that became the norm. Cut interest rates, stimulate the economy. Even if you have to print a little bit more money, it won't get out of control. And then after the crisis, did they really crack down on Wall Street? No, they didn't. Dodd-Frank was a joke, and then it got repealed. Barack the Booty Obama comes in. Oh, he's a socialist. Yeah, he was center left. Yeah, he nationalized the auto industry for a while. But even that is an exaggeration to really say it was fully and truly nationalized. And Obama was going to change Social Security in such a manner that the payments would have been cut. The Republicans could have had a field day with Obama, like they could have had with Clinton. Clinton, by the way, would have probably privatized Social Security and Medicare if the Republicans hadn't focused on Lewinsky. Then you get Trump, massive corporate tax cuts, in fact, and deregulation. If you have an LLC now, you can practically avoid taxes legally. This is how loose it is. If it's not just a complete hobby or a scam, you can do so. What I'm saying is that the bulk of our approach has been let the government get out of the way. It's not perfect. Obviously, the inflation has caught up due to Trump and Biden, especially. But the idea that we have this anti capitalist mentality, that we're living under communism, I've heard people claim we're living under communism. And they're not just talking about like the government being intrusive in people's lives, but they actually think that they're living under economic communism, which is a little bit of a stretch. It's just ridiculous. Like, how much further would you go? Do you guys actually believe that if the Oliver Anthony types got libertarian policies, would it really benefit them? If everyone was an independent contractor, if you just went directly to the company, there were no unions, and we went ahead and eliminates like OSHA requirements because they just get in the way, and you eliminate licensing. So you don't have to go to trade school, get so many hours to be a full-fledged plumber or whatnot. You can just learn it. So we could take Paco over the border. As long as he can competently be an electrician or a plumber, you can pay him $17 an hour. Would that be better for these working class guys? Would it be better if you had more trade deals which offshored industry? Would it be better if everyone was just a libertarian superhero working as in a contracting sense? Maybe someone can persuade me it's the truth. I'm sure taxes would be lower. You might have less inflation, but do you really think the working class would be materially better off? They'd have a better quality of life. They wouldn't be working extreme hours for low pay if we just deregulated everything and got the government completely out of the way of any sort of economic regulation. You see, at the end of the day, if you're complaining about elites, you've got three realistic solutions. One is that you're the elites yourself, which is difficult to achieve because oftentimes by the time those people become elites, their interests are not the same as the common person. Two, you use some form of coercion. You threaten the elites into a form of submission so that they do what's in the interest of the working class, the nation as a whole. Or three, you do nationalize, you use some form of socialism. That's how you're going to actually get them under your heel. It's not going to happen because you keep cutting taxes and deregulating and talking about, oh, people on welfare, people on welfare. The people on welfare, in many respects, are the people that can use the system to enrich themselves at such a high level. And then, due to the mentality that, well, it's all about business, it's actually relatively difficult. You can do fairly illegal things, as I said, in the business world and get off scot-free. You have to really screw up to a massive scam to go down and actually be prosecuted. So this is my point. It's all good to have the anthems, feel good, think of the old days. But until they change their attitudes when it comes to the economy, if they keep running back to this free market individualism, it was actually interesting. They interviewed this guy, Oliver Anthony, and he was saying, yeah, diversity is our strength. We have to keep promoting diversity. You're going, okay, so you still don't really get it. These are all constituent factors of a system which is working to destroy people like yourself. And you're singing about, oh, it's just because of these elites, but we can't do anything except wait to get treasure in heaven and complain about it. No, there are solutions. Those solutions just might clash with the ideology that you are typically adhering to.